Here we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so I think that if you try to come in, it'll just pop up like this and you can press admit, but
Okay.
there's quite a few people already in, so there might be some late bloomers.
Sounds good. Well, hello, everybody. I'm not used to presenting both on Zoom and live, so excuse me if I'm looking down some. And, I take it you can all hear me. I can't see you, so I'm assuming you can hear me out there in Zoom land. And thanks for joining. It's really great to be here with you early in the year. Oh, there's my daughter. Hey, Emma. You know, just kind of on the heels of completing a big year in Plumas County. And it's been a really interesting year. I have some slides on here with Rachel and Angie right after we found the long-tailed duck that broke the big year record for Plumas County. And I'll talk about, let's see here. Oh, I'm afraid I'm not advancing here. Just one sec. Oh, there we go. Maybe if I hit the, okay. I was going to do, just to mention before I talk that we're on Maidu homeland here, and all of the lands and the birds that birded with my friends this past year is all Maidu homeland. And the Maidu have names, of course, for all the birds and all the places. And I intend to learn those. I'm not very good at them. So I'm going to be talking about the places and the birds who are post-European, post-European language, scientific language. But I want to honor that we're on Maidu homeland here. Before I start. Okay. Partly because I did not fully finish my presentation. I'm calling this part one. actually, 365 days, a lot of birds. And I should have added another day of preparation, but this is mostly going to focus on the first half of the big year and some lessons learned. I might get to the end, but I'm thinking part one. So what, I know a lot of you are talking about big year, like what is a big year? You know, everyone just knows what a big year is. It's nomenclature really to birding and birders. And basically a big year, here's as it's defined by the American Birding Association and on Wikipedia. A big year is a personal challenge or an informal competition among birders who attempt to identify as many species as possible by sight or sound within a single calendar year and within a specific geographic area. And a lot like the Christmas bird count, which was started by the Audubon Society. So it's really fun to be here, you know, speaking and great hosting this. The tradition really came out of Frank Chapman starting the tradition of counting birds on Christmas Day in 1900. He suggested that he was a really influential ornithologist in the New York area. Action, because at the time there was this tradition called the side hunt where people would shoot as many birds, kill as many birds as they could on Christmas Day, unfortunately. But Frank Chapman and the Audubon Society really started to shift that energy some by deciding to count as many birds instead of shoot as many birds as they could. So, and eventually out of that also evolved what's called a big day, where you count as many bird species as you can in one day, and a big year where you count as many species as you can in a calendar year, starting on January 1st, ending on December 31st. So the most common geographic areas that big years happen in are not necessarily counties traditionally, everything from global to continental. Mainly, you know, us Americans were so competitive, really got going in the United States and North America more than other parts of the world. So most big years, as you may have seen in movies or read in the press, happen at the North American scale or United States. But they also happen in states and provinces. And then more regional and local big years are starting to happen, and they're becoming increasingly popular because of things like, carbon. There's a lot of carbon emissions if you're jetting around a continent or the globe counting birds. It's fun, but it's also detrimental overall to climate and in terms of carbon emissions. So yeah, so local big years are coming more into popularity than they were in the past. And something I found too, and I joined with a lot of you, see a lot of birders that I birded with and enjoyed time over this past year. There's a lot of potential for contribution to knowledge of local birds with a local big year. It's essentially almost like akin somewhat to a sabbatical in an academic sense, where you're really dedicating yourself for a full year to the study and pursuit and identification and knowledge of birds locally. So you got to really cover your geography when you're doing a local big year. If you're gonna try to get all the birds you can, you have to cover all the edges. Oh, here's a a slide. I don't know how many of you have seen this movie, The Big Year. Oh, cool, quite a few people. So I didn't have to explain all this to most of you. Yeah, it's a funny movie. It actually is, from a birding standpoint, pretty accurate. They're doing a North American big year where they're birding both in the United States and Canada. And that's what that movie is about. Some of my favorite comedians are in it. One of the only things I noticed, I mean, there's some inaccuracies about the timing of migration and things like that. One thing I noticed in the movie that was quite inaccurate is they often don't focus. You see Steve Martin and Owen Wilson here, they're holding their binoculars with one hand. Throughout the movie, they often pick up their binoculars and look with one hand without focusing. The director should have caught that. They should have had an ornithologist advisor, I guess. So in terms of my own interest in birds and path to why I might even do a big year, it started out, I was lucky to have parents. My parents are here, Richard and Becky Hardy, that took me out in the outdoors. See, I grew up in Portola, was born and raised in Portola. So this county is my home county, and this watershed is my home watershed. And yeah, I was lucky out. We would go on outings. This is a picture of me and my brother, probably with my first pair of binoculars there. And we're no doubt out getting worms for the opening day of fishing season in Sierra Valley. You can see both our eyes are down. I think we're looking for cow pies, under which was always the best worm spots. But we also noticed birds while we were out there. But yeah, just being outside. I grew up hunting a lot, hunting and camping in national parks and traveling a lot. So I was really lucky to have a connection to nature through my parents, and share that with my brother Mark too. Here's a couple slides of birding on the Sierra Valley Christmas bird count with my dad, who's still one of the best wildlife observers I've ever been with. He's got a keen eye and sort of 20/10 vision, so he can always see raptors and wildlife about twice as far out as I can. But I learned a lot of attention to geography and detail of wildlife and love of wildlife through both my mom and dad. And this is me and my two kids in Montana, and we're looking at their first trumpeter swan. My son's probably not seeing it because he's holding his binoculars backwards, but he's doing his best. He's probably, what, 3 in that shot. So, and here's probably what we were looking at. We're through our binoculars and spotting scopes. The trumpeter swan on the left. Yeah. Yes.
I didn't want to interrupt you, but I want to get that bubble off the top of your screen so we can see your photos a little better.
Oh,
I apologize.
oh, yeah. Oh, shoot. I told you I wouldn't mind. Yeah, thank you for admitting them. I'll try to mind that. Yeah, so this is a trumpeter swan. We were in the Red Rocks National Wildlife Refuge in southwestern Montana there. And yeah, it's kind of funny with a crowd this big. I was thinking of like letting people guess all the birds, but it would be about a 5-hour presentation. So I'll pick a few for people to guess. Rough-legged hawk in Sierra Valley is that other bird. So even though you might think, raised by a family who values wildlife, spend a lot of time in nature, you might just have this tendency to think it was a linear path to being interested in birding and birds and doing a big year. But like a lot of people in our lives, mine became somewhat circuitous. And I'll talk more about that. Only recently was I motivated to get back into birding. And that path, both into the passion for birds and birding, and then out of it and back into it, went through Arizona for me. My family, my parents are from Arizona, from Yuma, Arizona, and went to NAU and University of Arizona. And after I graduated from UC Davis in 1993, I took a cross-country trip that included southeastern Arizona. And on that trip, I birded in what are called the Sky Islands of southeastern Arizona, which include really cool mountain ranges. You can see a picture. Well, these are two southeast Arizona mountain ranges. One on the left is the Chiricahua Mountains, just utterly spectacular mountain range near the New Mexico border in southeastern Arizona. And these are the Tucson Mountains in the lower right corner. When I was on that trip through southeastern Arizona, and I was a young person. I was 23, I think, yeah, 23. And we all have kind of our peak experiences with birds. One of mine was with this species in the upper left in the Patagonia Sonoida Preserve, which is owned by the Nature Conservancy. It's in a little town in southeastern Arizona that Sonoida Creek goes through, and it has like immense cottonwood, willow, riparian gallery forest. And I always sort of like the idea maybe of doing conservation for a career, but I found myself on this preserve, and it's a world famous birding preserve. Partly that part of the country is world famous for birding because the Sierra Madre mountain range comes up into the United States right there. So a lot of Mexican bird species that breed in the Sierra Madre come up into these Sky Island mountain ranges. But I just had this amazing experience where I sat along Sonoida Creek and watched this male green kingfisher catch little minnows. And I watched for about an hour as it would dive down, and they're really small. Our belted kingfishers are about like this, a good sized bird, real chunky bird. These green kingfishers are about this big and their bill's almost as long as their body. But they have this really interesting habit where they catch little minnows and they whack them on their perch to kill them. They basically like whack, 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 and then they gulp them down. And I watched this male kingfisher for the better part of an hour doing that, and just fell in love with the place and the bird. So it's still one of my favorite species, the green kingfisher. And then forward a couple of years, partly due to that experience, I decided to go to graduate school at the University of Arizona. And I ended up studying owls, habitat selection by owls in the Sonoran Desert. And I focused on this species that you can see in its cavity in the saguaro cacti called the elf owl. So because I'm one of the only species to have ever studied the elf owl, I'm one of the world's expert on elf owls by default. No, and by a lot of hard work too. But anyhow, through about that experience of traveling across the country birding, and I did do a big year that year, by the way. It wasn't a full big year, but I timed it so I hit all the migration through Arizona and South Texas as species were migrating across the Gulf of Mexico, which is depicted in that movie, The Big Year, sort of exaggeratedly so. But and then so I decided to go to graduate school, and it really, in Southeast Arizona, it really strengthened my love of birds as well. That experience. I should have had another slide here maybe, but right after I took that trip, that cross-country trip, and went to graduate school, I came back to the Feather River Watershed and got a job with the Forest Service. A lot of things happened pretty fast. I started working for the Forest Service as a wildlife biologist, got married, helped start the Feather River Land Trust and some other conservation organizations, and then had kids shortly on the heels of that. And you know, life gets busy, you know, we get busy, we make our choices. And somewhere along the way in the realm of going in some of it was just providing for my family. Some of it, I tend to be performative by nature, sort of pleasing by nature. And I won't go into it. This isn't like an autobiography or a psychoanalysis, but I lost track of the passion I had for birds. And it, you know, happened day by day, duty by duty. I just lost track of what got me in that field in the first place. And I was this past November 2021, I guess, you know, so 2 Novembers ago, I woke up, and I have this portrait in my bedroom of saguaro cacti in the Sonoran Desert. And I woke up from a really active dream and just looked at that and realized that I had not been back to this place I love so much in 2 decades since I went to school there. I love the place. And it really was sort of a mirror in my face of why would I have let that happen? You know, how could I not have visited this place that is in my heart? I used to live there with Neil Caiazzo in the back there, met him there. That's another story, huh, Neil? We moved back here together. So it you know, sometimes something hits you so hard that I just had to plan and go visit this place. It's like an old friend, basically. So I had not taken a trip in about 20 years, same kind of timeline, having kids and such. I'm not blaming you, Emma. It's my own, my own life choices and my own career and stuff. But I planned a trip. I had not taken a trip of more than 3 or 4 days in 20 years on my own. And I used to love to travel alone. I used to love to go wilderness hiking and driving across the country and adventuring and birding. And so I planned this trip. I planned a 3-week trip to southeastern Arizona by myself and was lucky to have that time. And man, it was, it was very emotional coming back to the place and saying hi after all that time. And the place I saw the green kingfishers right behind me and my friend Dave Griffin here. But yeah, these are some slides of, that's the Santa Rita mountain range, one of the Sky Island mountain ranges. This is up in the upper right is my friend Dave Griffin, who I went to graduate school with. He used to go birding a lot. I was really fortunate to reconnect with him after all those years. And to reconnect with other people there too. I have family in Tucson, and you can see the smile on my face. I was loving being there and reconnecting in a lot of different ways, reconnecting to my passion, reconnecting to a lot of near and dear people to me who in the busyness of life, I had just lost connection and contact with, partly because of that shared passion with birds. So it felt wonderful to have that breathing in me again, feel that connection that drove me into ornithology and conservation in the first place. One other thing I have on this slide, Dave, I've never been all that into listing. See, I caught it this time, Liz, admit, for the latecomers like me. I've never been all that into listing birding, just like listing birds for the sake of just identify them and move to the next one, identify and move to the next one, identify. There was a stage in my life in my 20s where I did that and I was pretty good at it. But I think partly why I lost some connection to birding is that kind of mentality of just like identify. Dave, my friend Dave, he's the classic example of someone who, when he sees a bird, he's asking himself questions. Where is this bird coming from? If it's migratory, where else does it occur in this region? Is habitat adequately protected where this bird occurs? Is it, what plumage is it in? Is it male? Is it female? Where does it go after it's here? You know, these kind of broader questions. Bird can be a window into the broader world, into migration, into habitat loss, into climate change, et cetera. So he really, in addition to, we had some great birding together, he really reminded me of the relevance of pursuing birding as a passion. And these days, as you know, with the things like Christmas bird counts and an eBird, where you can enter your data online, you can really make contributions that were harder to make before by sharing what you're learning. So anyhow, as I drove back home from southeastern Arizona and that trip, I felt a lot of energy. I felt a lot of rekindled passion, which you can't really put a price on, but it felt lovely to be feeling that. So basically, as I was driving back home, it was a really snowy drive home on Highway 95 through Nevada and stuff, but and I had been studying eBird in Arizona. And man, what a wonderful online software program for those of us who love birds. I felt like I learned more about birds in Plumas County in like a week in Arizona looking at eBird than I've had in the last 15 years or something. So I made a decision that I was gonna, and among those things, I saw how many birds people had seen in Plumas County, what the record was and stuff. And there was, and I don't know if Scott and Amber, if you're on here or not, but the record, it was like a really amazing record. The big year for Plumas County was was 251 species. And I had looked at all of them. Then was by Scott and Amber Edwards, who live on Chandler Road and used to be really engaged with Audubon. They're still really great birders. The next highest was 231 by Scott and Amber Edwards. The third highest was 229 by, I won't say who it is. I don't want to like into a pecking order here, but the next ones were 229, 228, 227. So really remarkable to have a total that was 20 more than anyone else. And that was back in 2012. They had set the record, and they had the second highest in 2011. But after scouring eBird, I thought it might be fun and attainable to try to use that, because I have a competitive side, but also to use it just as something to shoot for. I hadn't really had a real quantitative goal in life in a while, that felt meaningful to me. So I use that number as a way to ride my newfound passion. And then in terms of prepping, like I say, I studied eBird like crazy, including the bordering counties of Butte and Lassen and Sierra and Washoe. I kind of look at Washoe County a lot on eBird. That includes Reno. I talked to Colin Dillingham, Bob Badigan, Ryan Burnett, Scott and Amber about gear and potential strategy. And then I unwisely spent about $6,000 on new optics, because sometimes for me, like birding and bridge behind me is the best way to go when I set a goal. But Bob Badigan have been really helpful in recommending, because a lot of the birds like out in Lake Almanor are at a distance way out in Sierra Valley. They had a really bad spotting scope, and it's key, to have a good spotting scope to look at the long ones. And then I did focus in on that goal. Like I say, I set a couple benchmarks for those of you who are hitting it hard here early in January, of 100 species by the end of January and 200 species by the end of April. So then I jumped in, unlike this year. And I don't know if I've told you guys, but I'm not doing a big year this year. It's pretty intensive. It's pretty, I once had when I was helping to start the Feather River Land Trust, there was this nonprofit trainer who talked about being on a board of directors, like Mark Smiley, Karen, being on a board of directors, like being on an all-star team, that it wasn't supposed to be something that you were on for a lifetime or something. It's supposed to be something that you get on it and you're all in for a short amount of time. And when you're not all in, you step off of it. It's not like you ride. And the same mentality on a big year. It's sort of an exceptional circumstance rather than something you would necessarily do year after year. unless you're retired and that was, there were no other obligations in your life or something. So the geography, let me see how I'm doing on time here. Okay, I'm going to try to stop around 6. So, but in terms of the geography, Plumas County is a really interesting, really interesting county, because this is the Feather River Watershed, but here's Plumas County. It stretches, it's really large. The county itself is 1.7 million acres. The watershed is about 2.4 million acres above Lake Oroville, 2.34. So it's large, it's whether you're counting the watershed or the county, it's about the size of Yellowstone National Park. So it's a really large area that spans from about 2,000 feet down in the foothills in elevation to the Great Basin on the east, and then spans from the northern tip of the Sierra range to the Cascades and Mount Lassen on the south. So it's so partly because of that, it has a lot of different habitats and real wonderful bird diversity. By the way, there's been, at least on eBird, there's been 327 bird species identified in Plumas County. If you were to count my due time and non-eBird records, there'd no doubt be some other species as well. But here's some of the habitats. Here's some nice black oak woodlands with Johnson Hill in the background. That was one place I climbed this year. I ended up exploring a lot of places I hadn't climbed, and that's right by where Chandler Road takes off of Highway 70 as you're coming into East Quincy, and you hit that part of Chandler Road. There's this nice hill up on your right called Johnson Hill. And I highly recommend not coming up the south face of it, because it has so much poison oak that it's just riddled with poison oak. But it's also riddled with a lot of good birds. So I'm not allergic to poison oak, but many are. And then, on the Great Basin side, this is the east side of Sierra Valley, which gets less than 15 inches of rain a year and is much more akin to the Great Basin than the Sierra. So there's a lot of unique Great Basin-like birds that are on the east side of the watershed in the county. Other habitats that are, that we see in Plumas County, large wetland complexes like this in Sierra Valley along Marble Hot Springs Road. And this is Indian Creek going through the Hart K Ranch in Genesee Valley on the right. Also, there's a complexity of geology. This part of the Sierra is more than just granite. There's a lot of volcanic formations like Vestey's Butte here by Beckworth Peak on the west side of Sierra Valley. And then Lake Almanor provides one of the biggest lakes in the Sierra Nevada. So a lot of lacustrine habitat and water birds, including oceanic birds that hit Lake Almanor, which provide a lot of interesting opportunities. So on to the birds. I know you're birders, you're here for the birds. I had to give some introduction there just to, because this was, for me and for a lot of people that do big years, there's a personal side to it. And then there's the bird side, and it's been impactful in both realms for me. So on to some birds. I wanted to divvy the birds up into some different categories. As I say, I didn't quite get done with my presentation, so we'll see where it goes. But a lot of us take for granted. We think often of migratory species that may spend the winter here, but not the year round. A good percentage of birds in the Feather River Watershed are with us year round. That's why the residents among us. I actually tallied them up. There's between 80 and 90 species that regularly are in Plumas County for the whole year. Some get pushed down, especially waterfowl. If the weather's really bad and everything ices over, some species will go downhill. Some other species as well. But here's some of those 80 or 90 species, that And it was interesting. I birded almost every day this past year, sometimes only for an hour, sometimes on weekends, like for long days. And I started seeing these residential birds differently, because as seasons changed, as birds came and went, they're always with you. You know, their calls are always with you. They're kind of always watching you. They're always in the auditory and visual environment, and they live here with us all the time. You know, so I really came to appreciate them more in some ways. Starting out here with the common raven and Canada geese, which are one of my totem type birds. And here, I think probably the most common bird during my big year, at least, was the one on the right. Anyone? I'm sure a lot of people know. Anyone who's like stretching on the one on the right, want to guess? Like they're not totally sure? Want to put it out there in public? Lynn, yes. Northern flicker, nice job. Here's some other residents we see almost every day, including in the winter. The Steller's jay on the left, and the dark-eyed junco, the Oregon subspecies, on the right. All right, how about anyone want to guess on the one on the left on this one? Yeah, who said that? White-headed, yes. Male white-headed woodpecker with that nice red crown and white face. I like birds like that, like the yellow-headed blackbird, red-winged blackbird, white-headed woodpecker, you know, seems like red-tailed hawk, you know. Yeah, that is a red-tailed hawk on the right too. Yeah, woodpeckers in general are, you know, constitute a pretty good percentage of these year-round residential birds. The one woodpecker species that tends to migrate out is the Lewis's woodpecker. I've seen some really big concentrations of them in the low in the Feather River Watershed, and in gray pine, blue oak areas. They tend to go down in elevation. They don't leave for that long, but they do tend to take off. But pretty much the other dozen or so woodpecker species we have seem to hang out, you know, in all kinds of weather, you know, from the mild to the very harsh. So with the woodpeckers are a good time generally to go birding, you know, and it's kind of surprising, you know, that in some ways they are insectivorous, but the insects that they feed upon are often, you know, protected by bark and the elements somewhat, and that's where they're. And then in the case of acorn woodpeckers, it's mainly the acorns they're feeding on. I did do more than that. Okay. All right. I'm glad that Jim Badigan is not in the room with us here, because he was inappropriate after our American Valley bird count and commenting on these species. But these are two well, that's interesting. Who said wren? You're partly right. You got the name partly right. The one on the left is the bush tit, and the one on the right is the wren tit. It's sort of like resembles a wren in many ways, the way it cocks its tail, but it's a wren tit. And we're especially we have the highest elevation population of wren tits in the whole Sierra Nevada here around Quincy. The montane chaparral fields we have, like up off of Mount Huff Road, that Johnson Hill I pointed out off of Chandler. Even if the larger brush fields off of the South Park Trail system, there's a lot of wren tits, and it's really unusual. Usually they're more like 2,000 feet and lower in chaparral in the foothills, but we have this higher elevation population. So in fact, I heard one singing just the other day when the sun came out. I get this great. Who can do a good wren tit? Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Oh, you want me to do him?
Yes, we want to do.
All right. 6-pack for every impression. No, I'm just kidding. Oh, you go ahead. Bouncing ball. Yeah. Very similar to the cadence of a screech owl, of a western screech owl, which hangs out in some of those same areas. Lower pitch though with the screech owl, but that bouncing ball. Some other birds that we see whether we have feeders or we're out and about. These are both these are very adaptable birds that you see in almost all the habitats, including urban environments. But the spotted towhee, formerly rufous-sided towhee on the left, and then the lesser goldfinch on the right. And by the way, partly why I'm highlighting these a lot of people, if you're like doing a big year or something, tend to think, you just sort of like take them for granted or whatever. But if you don't get every single one of these 90, you aren't going to have a big year. You have to get every single one of the residential in terms of if you're pursuing a big year. And they usually come pretty fast, but some are easy to miss. You can miss like a wild turkey, for example, on the right here. And then these finches are tough. These finches are, I was looking at Scott and Amber Edwards feeders the other day, and they had Cassin's finches, purple finches, and house finches all. I mean, it was good that they were all together. You could kind of compare notes and stuff, but man, they're tough. You got to get really good looks at them, especially the difference between the Cassin's finch and the purple finch females is really. There's whole like articles written about that. This is a dinosaur that walked into my yard the other day. This one, no, it's a female wild turkey. Oh, this is the purple finch, a male purple finch. Yeah. About half of them are. Yeah. These two are. The ones that are like not very good. Well, the ones that are mediocre to not very good are mine. These two are mine. The other ones, and then Ryan provided a photo or two as well. Ryan Biver, thank you, Ryan. But the turkeys are just amazing. This was in front of my house, and I'd thrown some seed out there, and there's all these little juncos and finches out there, and in walks the wild turkey female. And literally, like, I mean, what are they, like more than 100 times the the mass and the size? Everything just scatters. So here's speaking of size difference here. Who has a good feel for what type of bird is on the left? What class of bird is it? Emmalyn? Oh, well, the one on the left. And what type of bird is the one on the left? It's the smallest of this type of bird. Falcon, yes. Good job, Christy. And what specifically is this falcon? Anyone? American kestrel, yes. And this is a male American kestrel. And there's quite a few of them this winter. They're year-round residents, and they breed here too. And then an immature great blue heron in the North Fork of the Feather on the right. A couple real mountain lovers that got named accordingly. Mountain bluebird on the left, and then a mountain quail on the right. And my dad is really good at, we used to hunt these guys. He's really good at calling them in. We tempted to give the whistle of, all right, I'll drink a little water here. I don't know if I can do it. It's just how our California quail, they give like usually a 3-note call. They do all kinds of interesting little sort of pecking noises and chicken-like noises and stuff, but the most common call sounds like Chicago. The mountain quail has two. It has a contact call when oftentimes their cubbies will scatter, like if they perceive there's a predator or they're threatened, they'll fly, they'll just jet off really quick and scatter. As they're reassembling, they give a contact call that is a whistle that is pretty simple. I'm not a great whistler, but just a real simple, it's a little lower pitch than that. And That's the mountain quail. So if you see, a lot of times quail are so fast, sometimes you don't ID them right away. But if you hear that whistle, it's usually about like 5 to 10 notes, like, it's the mountain quail trying to reassemble. And then they also give this crazy, like loud quark call that I think that's more of a territorial male thing, and I can't really imitate that one. It might scare people if I do. And like that. They're like, whoa, it's like really loud. Like, what the hell is it? And you wouldn't guess it was a mountain quail, really. And then, within the residents, and really key to a big year too, the residential species are owls. And let me get a brief survey in terms of how many owls you could possibly get in a big year in Plumas County. How many do people guess? Raise your hand if you have a guess how many owls you could get in a big year in Plumas County regularly, unless there was like a totally irregular lost owl, like a snowy owl. We've never had a snowy owl. You had 9. Any other? 12. Rachel, that's what it used to be. That's what we're figuring. It used to be 13, but then the barred owl has apparently been intentionally extirpated from Plumas National Forest in Plumas County. And sadly in some ways, because it is a native species, but it really predates upon spotted owls, upon California spotted owls. So the Forest Service and other agencies intentionally eradicated the barred owls. So now it's a dozen owls. And this year was an interesting year. Usually if you put your mind to it, you can get all dozen pretty readily. This was a challenging year in that 2 owl species that we pretty much always get kind of easily, the burrowing owl and the short-eared owl, weren't seen. The burrowing owl, no one saw a burrowing owl in Plumas County this year. And I was trying hard. I know a lot of their burrow spots and their colony spots in Sierra Valley. And they don't seem to be here the last couple of years. Sadly, probably a combination of drought and could be other factors. And then short-eared owl, another one that is short-eared owl, maybe not quite as surprising because they're what's called eruptive. They follow especially vole populations. Like when vole populations are really high, they tend to come in and nest in Sierra Valley in some pretty good numbers, like on the Feather River Land Trust Sierra Valley Preserve. When voles were peaking about 5 to 7 years ago, that we estimated there were about a dozen nesting pairs of short-eared owls on the Sierra Valley Preserve alone. So, probably, like 50 or something if you times that acreage of wetland out through Sierra Valley. But there wasn't one recorded, or at least a good one. There was one they counted, but they shouldn't have counted. Because I won't go into that, but I was out there at the same time. There was just one during the Almanor Christmas bird count that I happened across. It was the last bird I saw of the year. It was a short-eared owl. And I don't have, so I wasn't even telling you what these species are. How about this? So, the one on the left, this, sometimes I think of it as like a flying head because it's like, it's only about like this big and it has a really big head. And it has a funny name. Is anyone unfamiliar with this one on the left? This is one. Yeah, this is one that's hard to, this is a very, very secretive owl, a very, very nocturnal owl that, that you would be, Dave and Lucinda, you would be keyed in by learning its vocalization. And I know from having birded with both of you, both have really good ears. So if you were to go on, and any of you, go on Merlin and check out its call note. I bet you Rachel's good at its call note. It's kind of a single hollow hoot. Maybe I'll do this one since we want. And they're year round and they tend to be very vocal year round. I'll play this one because I can't imitate this one very well. There it is. But anyway, the way they really like mixed conifer forest, not too dense, but not too open. So there's a lot of habitat like right around the edges of Quincy on the north facing slopes, especially. Here is the song. Oh, it's faster than I remembered. This is a faster version. And it slows down. Morse Cody. But the so a way to find a lot of these little owls, like the flammulated owl and the northern nations. In my experience, the flammulated owl, and a lot of people think this, the flammulated owl is very ventriloquial. Like it has this low hoot, like, and you can't tell where it's coming from, or at least I can't. You know, it's like, is it there? Is it there? You can't track it down, or at least I can't. But the saw-whet owl, you can really track it down. You can really use the vocalization.
What was the owl that you and Brad used to be up at midnight at 2 a.m.?
Spotted owls. Yeah. California spotted owls. Yeah, I used to work for the Forest Service, and I was the spotted owl coordinator on the Plumas National Forest for a couple of years in the early 90s. So yeah, we used to chase a lot of owls, and then we hear these other species too.
And what's their call?
Oh man,
Yeah.
there's too many biologists in here. I don't have a great hoot. I suspect again, some of the, okay. It's kind of like, it's a 4-note hoot. I usually I have performance anxiety here. All right. It's kind of, kind of like that. And they do a whole bunch of, they do this monkey call with like, kind of like, they do all kinds of interesting stuff. Yeah, but anyway, yeah. So one thing about the owls is there's only one migratory species. The rest are year round. I may have misspoke earlier. Of the 12, the flammulated owl migrates into Mexico, kind of central to southern Mexico, and spends the winter down there. All the other owls, including barn owl, are year-round residents. So these are also species that you can really try to get a jump on, focus on, find them in winter, even, you know, do some ski owling, with the caveat that like I didn't, even though I know, because I used to be the spotted owl coordinator, where a bunch of the territories are, it's not, there's some species that are so rare, it's not ethical to go and play their call or to hoot for them. I waited until Colin Dillingham had a crew together that he needed help with, and I went with them to get my spotted owl for the year, because when you know, a lot of these owls are super common and stuff, but like spotted owls are rare. They're likely to be listed as is it threatened or endangered in the next year or two? I can't remember. Okay, it's possible but yeah. So when you bring them in, they tend to get vocal. They are more subject to predation from great horned owls and other raptors and formerly barred owls. So yeah, so there's some species that yeah, so in owls, it often is more of a, I used very little playback. Like Liz and I have been playing what's called playback or recordings, where you play recordings. In general, for diurnal birds, there was only a couple birds I played recordings of to try to elicit them in the big year. With real common species, it's not considered unethical. Like there's these ABA birding guidelines where with common species, generally considered okay for you to use limited amount of playback, but I chose not to. But for owls, it's kind of almost like expected to, if you're going for owls, to use some vocalization, either your own vocalization or playback, as long as they're the common ones. And then for barn owls, you got to know a farmer or rancher and go look in their barn. You got to get permission first, hopefully. Anyhow, so moving on to the next category. I told you I wasn't going to get through the whole big year here. What are we at? Oh, good. Yeah, this is part one. So what time is it? 5:52. Oh man, it's got to go on these tangents. So the next category birds, and it's very germane to the time of year we're in right now, is winter visitors. There's a number of species. I was looking in the Sierra Nevada Field Guide. By the way, this new field guide by part of the currency, of course, of birding our field guides, but this one's been in the field a lot, so it's dirty, but Keith Hansen created a field guide to the birds of the Sierra Nevada. It's specific to Sierra Nevada birds, and he's a great painter. But it's a real handy, almost fits in your pocket kind of a guide. And it really focuses on the 300 or so species that you commonly see in the Sierra Nevada. It's a great guide. I highly recommend it. But what was I saying that? So these, I went through the guide and kind of counted up these different categories of birds, but there's a number of species that just winter in Plumas County. With a few exceptions, they're almost always coming from further north, and they're coming either further north or from the east or northeast. And they're spending the winter here, where it's more mild than where they breed. And there's about 40 to 50 species that fit this category. So, one general strategy of a big year, you got to hit all the spots, you got to hit all the habitats, all the geographies, the edges of the Great Basin, the edges of the foothills, edges of the Cascade, into the Sierra, high elevation, low elevation. But it's also important to you got to hit all the times, all the months and the seasons. Because if you don't, you can miss entire categories of birds. And right now is a time for winter visitors and winter rarities. And here are a couple of the, they become more common as the winter goes on, especially in February. But snow geese on the left and tundra swans on the right, which is one of my daughter's favorite species. Yeah, indeed. And I can see why they're so beautiful. But there has been, it's kind of funny, there's been like this one tundra swan seemingly, or at least we all keep seeing just one swan in American Valley over the last month. And sometimes it's in the creek. They send us seen it in the creek. Sometimes it's been in the sewage ponds. Sometimes it's been in the flooded fields. I don't know I haven't seen it in a while. I don't know if anyone else has, but so tundra swans. But last year, one cool thing about eBird, not only does it document what species have been seen and the spatially where they've been seen, there's also data on the highest counts ever. So you get good, interesting abundance data for different species. Last year at Lake Almanor was the highest count ever for tundra swans in Plumas County by this amazing birder named Liam Huber. He actually counted them all. He counted over 3,200 tundra swans at one time by the causeway on Lake Almanor. So so sometimes it's a very significant watershed for tundra swans. A couple others here. Us former hunters would call these ones on the right speckle bellies, greater white-fronted geese. And then how about the one on the left? Anyone guessing on that one? Mr. Rob Wade, is that you in the back? Yes, common goldeneye. And this one's probably like a first winter male. It's a little brown on the head. It's not very good light, as is typical of my photos. So here's a lot of the winter visitors are waterfowl, and here's a couple other of the cool wintering waterfowl. This is an interesting one because these are two different genders and 3 different stages of hooded mergansers. There's the male on the left, and then the female in the center with that yellow on the bill, and then an eclipse male on the right. Then we have some ring-necked ducks, which I always think should be called ring-billed ducks on the right. One of the females is giving a little side eye there at me for trying to take too many pictures. By the way, that's one thing. If I do another big year, I'm going to have a good camera. I did learn, and I've shown some of you I've birded with, but it's called digiscoping usually, but you can take essentially all these photos, the half or so are mine. You can take pretty good photos through your binoculars using your cell phone, using your iPhone or whatever. or through a spotting scope. And it takes some getting used to, but Colin kind of taught me how to do that, and it came in handy. One really great thing, and I've seen Ryan Bauer use this to great effect, is one really nice thing about photography. You don't always have to identify the bird on the spot. You know, you take in the image, the data of the species, and you can study it, you know, whereas so many other times it's just in your mind. You know, you'll see a bird for like 4 seconds or something, and then you have your own biases and you have your memory, and sometimes you may, you know, your subject, whereas if you have that image. So I'm going to try to get into bird photography in the next couple of years, even though I'm getting decent with my digiscope. Another big category of winter visitors are raptors. We saw this rough-legged hawk on the left earlier. And then I think this bird, some of you may recognize this bird on the right. I think maybe the prettiest bird in Plumas County right now is residing this winter along Quincy Junction Road. And it is an adult ferruginous hawk. And it's just, this isn't a great photo of it, but just beautiful orange tones and those rusty legs. And yeah, there's like sort of 3 or 4, I would say, between the bike path and Quincy Junction Road. Yeah. And they often perch right on top of telephone poles or fence posts. And it's just a gorgeous, gorgeous species. But both of these are just here in the winter. And the rough-legged hawk significantly from the Arctic tundra. You know, they come all the way down here and spend their winters here if the snow load allows. Here's another, we talked about falcons. This is another falcon, which has one of my favorite bird names. This is a merlin. And yeah, there's a number of merlins in American Valley right now too. Right now, man, Quincy Junction Road is just like raptor, like central right now. And look for the dark black and white bands on the tail. And unlike, you know, American kestrels are pretty like flitty. They'll like go off, and they're often like, I mean, they can go pretty fast if they want to, but they're generally kind of casual and flitty. If you ever see a merlin flying, it's just like straight line, usually going to hit a bird or something. But when they're perched up, you can get better looks at them. They're extremely fast flyers. A lot of the winter visitors are also aquatic in nature. Here's a couple common loons on Lake Almanor. And this was one of the, and then there's this category of winter rarities or relatively rare species in the winter. You may notice a little difference between the real bumpy the bumpy forehead, flat head, and banded neck of the common loon on the right there. Look at the sort of light colored head and not having a neck band and a much narrower bill. See, these common loons have a very thick, long bill. This is actually a Pacific loon, which was usually is seen in Lake Almanor a few times, but was just seen once this year in Lake Almanor. Usually winters in the ocean, but Lake Almanor is like our inland ocean here in Plumas County. So look, Pacific loon is one of and these sort of winter rarities also, you know, maybe I should become like a big year consultant or something. There's some of the, you want to get a lot of these too during the winter. Here's some really not very good photos of white-throated sparrow, which looks a lot like a white crowned sparrow, but I don't think I can zoom into these, but has a very boldly outlined white throat. And these were real common in the fall and midwinter. I haven't been seeing them lately. This is a Harris's sparrow that Christy Jameson was nice enough to share that she had seen at her feeders in Sierra Valley. And this is a species that doesn't occur every winter in Sierra Valley. But when it does, they don't tend to hang out all that long. Like if you hear someone report a Harris's sparrow, this is a nice male Harris's sparrow, I would recommend getting over there and trying to see it as fast as possible because they're kind of in and out. They move a lot. They don't usually hang out in the Feather River Watershed very long. Couple cool Lake Almanor. You know, Lake Almanor is a really good place to see some of these winter rarities. On the left, yeah, you have, it looks at first glance like a common merganser, but it's actually a female red-breasted merganser, which is a pelagic merganser species that will show up in Lake Almanor. much thinner bill. And then on the right, a red-necked grebe, which is also a pelagic species. And again, sorry for some of my not so good photography. A couple others, the Barrow's goldeneye on the left. A good place to find it is at the mouth of Hamilton Branch in Lake Almanor. And then something that some of us saw in American Valley just a few days ago, the Eurasian widgeon, which is mostly nests in eastern Russia, but shows up in the winter in a lot of Western North America, including Plumas County. Just a beautiful bird. This is the male Eurasian widgeon. Where was it? It was along Chandler Road. After one of the big rainfalls, Lucinda, it was kind of halfway between the Spanish Creek Bridge and the Bengard Barn, kind of right in front of Mary's, is it Mary's house? The one that has a nice barn quilt on it, kind of. But yeah, where that was flooded out there on that big bend, it was just right out there but only seemingly for a day or two. This is one that a lot of us have been chasing this winter without success. It's usually a species that we see. Well, this is two different species that are really close. We have been seeing the one on the right, which is the loggerhead shrike. The one on the left, I don't think has been seen this year, and it's the northern shrike. Although someone, Scott Edwards thought he saw one yesterday in front of his house on Chandler Road, right near the intersection of Quincy Junction Road and Chandler Road. So, so we should get a posse out there looking for this one. It would be a Plumas County lifer for me. I've seen a bunch in Sierra County, but this is a really tough ID. But you see with the loggerhead shrike on the right, it has this really thick black mask that goes sort of through and over the top of its eye and then over the top of its bill. Whereas on the left, the northern shrike, which is bigger, even though you can't tell in this photo, its black mask kind of stops at its eye. And then the eye is very evident. There's white on top of the eye, and it has white on top of its bridge of its bill. So that's a tough ID. And they also have barring, which you can't see in this photo from Sierra Valley. The Sierra Valley is where they're both most commonly seen in Plumas County. And yeah, they often hang out like in bitterbrush or sort of sparsely treed areas. Ryan tends to see them along the Beckworth Genesee Road, north of Beckworth. All right, so I got to wrap up here because my time is growing thin in part one. Anyway, just to encapsulate this time that we've been covering and the time that we're leading into here. Late January through March, basically the winter visitors start to depart, especially as you get towards the end of that period. A lot of the species we just looked at, ferruginous hawk, rough-legged hawk, a lot of the waterfowl. You start to get early arrivals of migratory species. The first cranes that I saw this year were a couple days ago, kind of later than they have been, but on, I guess it was the 17th. Also some breeding waterfowl start to show up. Then, kind of prime time. And I was at 200 species by the end of April, but kind of prime time for migratory birds is this April through mid-May, where it's a really exciting time because it's kind of been a limited, there's kind of like the same 80 or 90 residential species, and then this, 40 or so winter visitors. And then you get this, amazing influx of species. And I think, my list kind of went from 110 to 200 in the second half of April or something like that. It's a key, if you're going to do a big year or just like study local birds, got to be here during that time. You got to be here late March through mid-May, because you're getting both the arrival of the local breeding birds, and you're getting all these passage migrants that are moving through to breed in areas that are further north. And I as I say, I was going to show slides of these too. And then a lot of there is this sort of second wave of some calling them straggler migrant local breeders. that they tend to arrive more end of May into mid-June. And there's not that many of them, but willow flycatcher, Pacific slope flycatcher, Swainson's thrush, common nighthawk are all kind of June arrivals. So don't forget about them. And then you know, unbelievably, a lot of these early migrants that went through, the shorebirds that are going up to Alaska and the Copper River Delta, the tundra up in the Arctic and stuff. Some of them actually start to come back down south by the end of June, mid-June. Some hummingbirds, some shorebirds. Interestingly, a lot of the longest distance migrants, they come through the latest, and they come through to the north the latest, and then they leave to the south the latest. They have very short breeding window up in the Arctic. So wrapping this up, midway through the big year, whether Liz knows it or not, this is part one. I'll try to do, whether anyone wants to come or not, there will be a part two. But I was, so I gave you that definition earlier of a big year being a competition, and you know, a competition against others, a competition with oneself. As I was immersing myself in this big year, I came to start thinking of it more as an immersive, rapid learning opportunity. I was seeing places in the watershed I hadn't seen in a couple decades. Places like the south slope of Lassen Peak, chasing Canada jays. Johnson Hill, just right off of Chandler Road, chasing rufous crowned sparrows and ending up in a bunch of poison oak instead. Down in the canyon, I found myself in some interesting compromised places where Big Grizzly Creek comes into the North Fork, looking for rufous crowned sparrows, looking for some new species in the Feather River Watershed, like oak titmice, canyon towies, phainopeplas, without success, but did some bouldering that was probably ill-advised, like on Grizzly Dome and Elephant Butte and stuff. So that was just wonderful to be getting out in my place again, in our place. And just rapidly relearning birds. As I say, I hadn't really birded heavily in a couple decades. eBird and other tools give us all a chance to really meaningfully contribute to the knowledge of local bird species and their habitats, which I really value a lot. And to just learn too. I mean, as I was studying eBird before I started my big year, I was really appreciating the breadth of data in there. Everything from, you know, like Mike and Sally Yost to Bob Badigan, David Arsenault. There used to be this Helen Green on Lake Almanor. And then, and a lot of you in this room too, just, I had kind of checked out of that scene. You know, I wasn't really engaged in the Christmas bird counts in eBirding. I had never eBirded before. And I just really valued, it's like a living bird encyclopedia of Plumas County and the Feather River Watershed. And I really highly recommend it for learning where people are seeing the birds, the phenology of the birds, when they arrive, when they depart, their relative abundances, gaps, and when they, you know, sometimes like with these eruptive species, they'll be there for a number of years, then they disappear for a number of years. You can ascertain those things through eBird, and it has felt really great to contribute to that this year. One of the real gems of the year has been just reconnecting with people who have a passion for birds and a passion for this place. That's something in how I talked about earlier, my preoccupation with performance, with success, with supporting my family. I had really let a lot of those friendships wane. And there's a thing in psychology called attribution error. For those of you who may have studied psychology or attribution error is what it's most commonly called. And it's the tendency to to ascribe someone's behavior to their essential characteristics as a person. Like if someone's late to a meeting, you tend through attribution error to think they are just a lazy person, or they show up late all the time. They're a slacker or whatever, rather than it's more often due to their external circumstances. Like they got in their kid was sick, or they got in a traffic accident, or whatever. They had to make a call to their mother or something like that. I mean, this is sort of tangential maybe, but one thing I have found great, I have really, really valued how people have kind of welcomed me back into the birding community, you might say. I think a lot of people thought it was odd that I sort of disappeared for a long time. People I used to bird with a lot and stuff, but really, it's almost like the attitude's been, oh, there you are again. And I really, really am grateful for that. And I value it highly. May I do the same thing. And as I said, it's a chance to give and to receive. One thing, the birding, there's a lot of really good birders. There's one, Ken Kaufman in a talk I saw recently. If the purpose of birding is to enjoy birds. So if you enjoy birds, you're a really good birder. You know, I tend to sometimes be making value judgments, or there's some birders who can identify by sound anything they hear. Like Ryan Burnett is such a birder. He's the Sierra Nevada director of Point Blue. I was out with him some this year. I mean, any little chip note, he can identify often not only the species, but the gender, the age, you know, of like an orange crown warbler. So they're just like, oh my God, how do you do this? But as I say, the purpose of birding is enjoyment and joy. And if you enjoy birds, you are a good birder. But this has been a good chance to receive help from others. This is a very non-territorial birding community here. I find very willing to share data, locations, tips, passion, techniques. So I encourage you all to take advantage of that. It's been a real blessing in my year for me. And this is an interesting one on a personal side too. As I say at the start of this year, you know, set this goal, which was a big goal. You know, it was I knew I could get to 230, 231, you know, the second one, but 251 was like, whoa, it's like a big hairy. And I enjoyed my family and my kids, you know, so I've been very focused on supporting them, and kind of often just my tendency not to put my own passions out front, you might say. So it's been a good thing, I think, even though I think it pissed them off at times. And I was setting more boundaries than usual and stuff. I think it was good to do it, because there's this tendency to, oh, there's a perfect time for a big year. It's like after your kids are out of the house, after you're retired, when you have enough money, you can travel limitlessly, you have all the right gear. And then, yeah, and then maybe your hearing's not there. Maybe you get sick, you know, maybe. So I don't know where that came from. Yeah, so it was good for them to see me do that. And then, so yeah, and then it had this element of, you know, wherever you go, there you are. Whether you're in your passion zone, you know, starting a land trust, or doing self-growth work, or finding birds again. Your triggers and your issues and your shadow follows you. It followed me into the creation of the Feather River Land Trust, followed me into parenting, follows me. And if you don't, so to make that more tangible, given wanting to look good, to succeed, to perform, performative tendencies, sometimes in the pursuit of birds, I'd get caught up in the number. I'd be out there in the, you know, climbing granite on Grizzly Creek, and just be thinking, oh, I'm at 239. Why am I stuck on 239? What the, you know? And it's like, oh man, I'm here. This got me out here. This pursuit of birds got me out here in the first place. And I'd often, and then also to accept the anxiety, that's partly the shadow that is to be healed, is what comes up, even in the pursuit of your passion. What comes up is what there is to look at. So yeah, so it would follow me there too, but in a way, the practice of it, because I was doing it every day, I took these shadows into a place that was friendly for me, and into the passion. And there's, still working on it. So that's, yeah. All the Zoom people, they're not affected by my emotion. I can't even. Apparently, what are you? You're not even saying anything. No, no. You guys are a tough audience. No, they're all like dropping a little bit. So anyhow, like I said, it did become a practice for me in this early year. And again, I'm not. I can't get to the point of the mill pond with Rob Wade and Rachel and Ryan finding the big year breaking bird for me, the long-tailed duck. But I'll put out that teaser for part 2, which I hope to do sometime soon. Because there is a lot to unpack in a year where you dedicate your life for a year to something. And I intend to, if you're willing, maybe nobody will come back, but I would like to share not only because I was at 225 species by the end of May. So then that's 7 months to get from 225 to 253. That's really the hard part. You're going out, you're seeing 90 species in a day. You've seen everyone over and to bring presence to that. Like, oh, there you are again, spotted towhee, there you are. There you are, the common loon, and like, oh, this is awesome, and yet you have your radar out for the real rarities. And that's what I want to share maybe next time I talk, is like every one of the last 25 is like a super rare bird that I was targeting, looking for in the habitats they and one thing about a local big year relative to a US big year or a continental big year, and those, the people who do those big years, they're amazing birders. So they're totally amazing birders on par, but they're pretty much checking rare bird alerts, and they're really good at logistics of like, how am I going to fly to Ottawa and be back in San Diego in 10 hours? Because there's the albatross and the blue-footed booby there, whatever. And they're really good at that. So they go to the spot the bird has been seen, and they're really good at finding it. They're really. But a local big year, you got to find. There's people. We have enough birders where some birds are going to be found for you, but you're going to have to find the vast majority yourself. You're going to have to find the rarities yourself. So that gets you out. That gets you out and looking and learning, and yeah, and we learn together. Hopefully lifts us all up. But yeah, I hope to share. There's a lot more. There's more to unpack here. But yeah, thank you, and I'll take any questions. I know I went over time. Thanks for your forbearance. Sure. Whoa, where is this?
I pulled you up.
Yeah.
So you're a biologist, you're a conservationist, the field of conservation biology. How do you feel that that field, conservation biology, how does it fit into both the work you did with Big Year and the greater good of the work you've done?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I looked at it with that lens, you might say, like my friend Dave Griffin in Arizona. And I learned a lot from recently in Butte County, Liam Huber, who and then Ryan Burnett too. I've been hanging out with him, talking to him. Always having that in mind, like where did this bird come from? Why is it here now? What is it keying into habitat wise? Is there enough of that habitat? Why is it here some years, not others? Just kind of asking yourself the questions that, to use some jargon, sort of informs reserve design. Like, do they have enough habitat now? Where is that habitat going to be when the climate is changing? So it's introducing a lot of real live data that's very non-theoretical. You know, you're actually seeing the species, you're seeing where they're breeding, you're seeing where they only stop over and evidently not good enough for breeding habitat, and we keep moving. I don't know, so it informs. And then you get to know the geography more, you know, sort of less blind spots in like the overall Northern Sierra, Southern Cascade, because you covered it all, you know, you kind of see where the fires hit, see what the birds did relative to the fires in your own, you know, in your own conception, in your interpretation of the eBird data, in your own review of literature, kind of. But to me, it really took it more out of the theoretical and into the real, you know, and I don't know. So I have more thinking to do on that because I'm just sort of fresh off of it, but I feel renewed rigor for conservation work, partly because of this big year, in large part because of this big year, because I hadn't been out with the species a lot. You know, I've been behind my computer. I've been in meetings with foundations and committee meetings and my personal life and stuff. And just reconnecting with the wild, with the species. Because you're noticing, like when we were doing the Sierra Valley Christmas bird count, there was a big pack of 28 coyotes eating these cows. It was a super cold day. So you're seeing are there any wolves in the coyotes? No, but there's wolf tracks. You know, the wolves have been out there too. You know, so you're noticing, much more than just seeing, a broader picture. So getting out on the ground and partly in a data collection mode and way of seeing this has sparked a lot of connectivity in my mind. And I don't know where it's all going yet, but I'm excited about it.
I don't have any questions in the chat, so you guys have the table.
Jeff, hey.
It seems amazing that you set this record after being out of it for so long. Seems like it would be people that are trying to do that every year. What do you think it was, besides your competitive nature, that allowed you to do that after such a long gap? And I know you weren't totally out of it, but
that's a great question. And it also, like, it's interesting because of knowing how much energy it took to do the big year, you're sort of most well prepared to do another big year right after you do it.
yeah.
I also need to make money again and stuff. So, but I spent a lot of time, the best birders and the best people that are most prepared for a big year are ready for anything. They have actually, for example, probably birded a lot in the eastern US. They've birded all around the country. They sort of know every rarity. And you can study it online and stuff too, but you're really prepared for anything you could see in advance. Because a lot of time you're just getting like a millisecond or a couple second look or something. And there's about 5 species that I have 80% or higher confidence that it was, but I didn't list it. One of the nice things about eBird is it's peer reviewed. So it has a really high, Collins, the local reviewer, along with this guy, Liam Huber, has a really high standard of verification. With real rarities, they pretty much want photo documentation or auditory. You can actually take recordings too to verify. But those were the maddening ones. They were ones where oh man, I saw that in like South Texas once. And like, is that it? And then it's gone. And you're like, and then you just like read through all the books and stuff. So I was doing a lot of learning on the fly. I would sit with my scope and my binoculars at Lake Elsinore for hours in the early months, studying loons and grebes and ducks. And a person who had been doing it the last 20 years they'd be boop, boop, that species. I had to learn a lot. I spent like hours and hours reading in the field after I'd get back, oftentimes, especially with near misses. And these were like, oh man, like they were red-eyed vireo, like 95% sure I saw one on Spanish Creek. There was a chestnut-sided warbler at the confluence of greenhorn, where it's like, oh, I think, but I've been using, and then there was one bird, we had a clay-colored sparrow that was approved by Colin, but I read up on it more and realized it wasn't. So I rescinded it. and they actually appreciated it, like the committee of people, they appreciated it. But yeah, if I'd have been like more ready, if I'd have been like all pre-ready, I'd have like I'd probably have close to 260 instead. But I used the standard of, I bet $5,000, 99% confidence interval or higher, and I bet $5,000 on my identification. So that's kind of my standard. So it's a high standard, so I didn't, integrity was part of the path for me. It was like a pleaser, wanting to look good, wanting to bump the numbers up. You come in with a bias. You're wanting to see something. And then, so I value the peer review part of it, because we all have biases, and especially when we're shooting for a number. So, so that, I guess when you're answering the question, I had to study a lot on the fly and relearn some stuff I used to know a lot better. There's a combination of refamiliarizing myself and original learning on a lot of the rarities. Yeah. And I loved it. I loved it. I didn't mind reading for 2 hours after I got back from birding.
Can I just say something really quick? So I noticed some people are leaving, and I really want you guys to be informed about Paul's next presentation. So if you do end up leaving, please put some sort of contact information on this sign-up sheet over here. And then Darla, I'd love for you to ask your question, and then I have a question on the chat that I'd love to ask you too.
I just wonder what the story is with the Phainopepla. Why are you expecting there might have been?
It's because I've been studying the adjacent counties really carefully on eBird, and there's records from like between Concow Lake and the Butte County line, like down along the river and stuff. So, and you're getting down in their elevation range. The canyon is so unique in how it's not like a lot of the foothills where it's gradual. It's like, whoop, you go down to 1,900 feet at the county line, or 1,800 feet. But it's just like, then you're up to like 2,500 feet just in, a couple hundred yards of climbing. But yeah, so there's close Phainopepla records down around Polga. And then there's close canyon California Towhee records around Concow, actually our side of Concow. And then titmice too. I keep thinking they're going to be like where Rock Creek comes in. There's a bridge that goes over Rock Creek, and you can get on the other side of the river where the highway crosses over. And there's a couple of nice patches of oaks in there that weren't hit by the fire. I just know there's titmice over, And titmice has never been recorded in neither juniper nor oak, nor the California Towhee, nor the Phainopepla, nor blue grosbeak is another one that hangs out really close to the county line. And then Micah Silver found breeding rufous crown sparrows down in that same area, Chambers Creek and on down, that I sort of refound them. They got hit really hard by the fire, but so some of these like low foothill, I just think we can add them to our county list if we work hard enough in the low middle fork, low north fork. And then same with the east side. I think we're missing, and actually, if you were to look at my big year, it's really good on anything that regularly occurs in Plumas County. Kind of like almost didn't miss anything that regularly breeds or otherwise regularly occurs. And then it's kind of hit and miss on some of the rarities, but I think on the east side, so documented breeding by black-throated sparrows for the first time in the Feather River Watershed. And then I think that I've seen woodhouses, scrub jay just over the ridge in Lassen County on the Puma Robles property, on the Anderson property, and then also juniper titmice. They're like real close. They've been seen real close. So I think we can add a few new breeders, just working the edges, and that is like long list of things. I wanted to get down with Rob in the little middle floor to the very bottom, like Hanson Bar and stuff, but you kind of you run out of days. You're listening, but pretty strategic wanting to hit those low and eastern Great Basin edge spots, and we came up with good stuff on that. But no woodhouses, no juniper titmouse on the eastern edge.
David Griffin said,
David.
we know what the last new bird was, long-tailed duck, but do you remember the first bird of the big year? By the way, great imitation of an American kestrel.
David, I'm glad you're on here. I couldn't see who was on there. So the first bird of the year was common raven. Yeah. This year it was a northern flicker. The last bird of the year, I meant to, I'll show a slide in part 2, but found myself out on the very last day of the year on December 31st. Reminds me of the movie The Big Year when we got chasing the snowy owl while everyone partying on New Year's. But I was out on the Learning Landscape Trail. It was snowing really hard as the sun went down and got dark, and it had rained quite a bit. So there was a lot of water out there, real flooded and stuff, but it was all auditory, and there were American widgeon. There were a lot of Canada geese flying around. There were a lot of gadwalls and mallards out there in the dark, all coming in kind of for their nightly roosting spot on the water. But then the last 2 species were great horned owl, Dave, a couple great horned owls, and Canada geese honking in the dark. But it felt good to, it may sound weird, but sort of do the big year justice. If you enter a big year, there's a sort of a fidelity to it, stay with it through it, even after we broke the record and stuff, because you kind of do it, you're not just doing it for yourself, you're doing it, theoretically, you're doing it for a broader birding community, for the knowledge bird. So took it right to the end there. And those are the last ones, Dave. Great horned owl and Canada geese, first one raven. Yeah.
Thanks, Paul.
You're welcome. I wish I was down there with you, brother.
I wish I was up there with you, man. Love you.
Yeah, we're gonna do it. I can't wait.
Paul, you mentioned that some of the places you hadn't been there in 20 years. I'm wondering if you have any reflections on how things have changed.
Yeah, man. Oh, that was, it was an interesting time to do a big year. Getting into some places I hadn't been, like comes to mind north of Clover Valley, where both the sugar and the Dixie fires burned in high severity, many parts of it. And when I was doing a lot of birding, I was doing goshawk surveys in there, and a lot of goshawks in those northern facing drainages of Jordan Creek, Charles Creek, Ferris, and man, this guy, they're not there anymore. I worry a lot about the old forest species. I didn't have that worry before, but I also took heart in, man, there were a lot of like so many wildflowers coming back in there, and in the riparian areas tending to recover really fast. And I was really shocked in a way that you could tell somebody, because I was there right when birds were arriving. And, anthropomorphism. They're kind of arriving at their montane chaparral patch, and it's not there at all. So they go to a log deck. There was a fox sparrow that was doing it. It was kind of looking around the log deck and then it starts singing from the log deck, and then in 2 weeks more, those manzanita and tobacco brush are sprouting, and the fox sparrow's on a little 6-inch sprout, and it's just like So, despair and hope, kind of mixed both, depending where it was. Seeing a lot of resilience in the species. Migratory species are particularly resilient. They have so many challenges on the way. So many habitats they go through. But man, they can adapt. Saw a lot of that with the fire. A lot of marginal habitat being used. A lot of even like total cristrified snag stands being used by woodpeckers and stuff. So it was, I don't know, that's some impressions I had. Anything else? Man, I don't know what else, but I'll have to think about that. But those are some of the impressions. Yeah, it provides like a retrospective almost, I do want to write, I do want to think and write about it more. And it's kind of one of those things where you're so in it day to day, and but I do want to reflect on it and give myself the space to do that. I've been doing this, sort of thinking about this talk into that. It's just that there was so much that I couldn't into one presentation. Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time to do this, and
You're welcome.
I hope that we can have another part 2 sooner
I
than
hope so too. I
later.
don't want to be
I
presumptive with that.
No, I would
It's
love
good,
to do that because I think that I'm hooked. I want the rest of the story. And I think others in the room can agree. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for being here and sharing it. And I know it can be long and winded and stuff, but and it is hard to condense, but appreciate you and your care of birds. You love this place, that you care about birds, and that you wanted to hear what I had to say about this crazy big year. But it's been very important to me, and I know it'll keep giving to myself and hopefully to what we're all doing. Yeah.
We're gonna do another one, like next year. right?
Yeah, probably, there's a time, there's a place, I can't, we'll see. I will do another one, but I don't know how long it'll be. Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Thank you. We've ever had for a speaker program. So thank you.
Here,
I appreciate you, and I appreciate you working with the technical.
Oh, yeah, great. If it wouldn't have been you working with